Long before the great empires of the archipelago rose to power, the island of Java was a land of untamed beauty and terrifying shadows. It was a time when the boundary between the mortal realm and the spirit world was as thin as a blade of grass, and monsters still walked the earth. In this ancient era, a kingdom called Medon lay under the dark shadow of a king who had forgotten his humanity. His name was Duata Senkar, a giant of a man whose heart had turned to stone and whose palate had developed a taste for human flesh. Every day, the people of Medon lived in a state of constant mourning, for the king demanded a fresh subject to be served for his meal every morning. The villages were silent, the markets were empty, and the once fertile fields were overgrown with weeds as the population dwindled in fear. Meanwhile, far across the sea, a young prince of great wisdom and spiritual power named Saka watched the horizon with a heavy heart. Saka was not just a warrior of the sword, but a master of the mind and the soul, seeking to bring order to a chaotic world. He was accompanied by two of his most loyal and devoted servants, men who were closer to him than brothers, Dora and Simbada. Dora was quick-witted and agile, a man of action who handled the logistics of their travels with unwavering efficiency. Simbada was the silent guardian, a man of immense physical strength and a spirit that was as steady as a mountain. Hearing the desperate cries for help carried by the winds from Medon Saka decided that he could no longer remain a spectator to such cruelty. The cycle of blood must end, Saka declared to his servants. A land cannot flourish when its soil is watered by the tears of the innocent. Before they set sail for the cursed island, Saka entrusted a sacred heirloom to Simbada, a golden crease of immense spiritual energy. Guard this blade on this remote island, Saka commanded Simbada. Do not let it fall into any hands but mine. Do not leave this place until I return to claim it. Simbada bowed low, his face a mask of solemn duty. I swear upon my life, my lord, that the blade shall not move until you stand before me. With Simbada left behind to guard the weapon, Saka and Dora continued their journey toward the heart of Medon. Upon arriving at the mainland, they were greeted by a landscape of desolation. The air itself felt heavy with the stench of decay and despair. They encountered an old man weeping by the roadside, whose only son had been selected for the king's breakfast the following morning. Saka knelt beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. Do not weep, father. Tomorrow I shall offer myself to the king in your son's place. The old man gasped, looking at the handsome, radiant prince. You are but a youth, stranger. Why would you throw your life into the maw of a beast? Because a king who eats his people is no king at all, Saka replied, his voice echoing with a divine authority. He is merely a parasite that must be removed. The next morning, the palace guards were shocked when a noble-looking traveler walked voluntarily through the gates, demanding an audience with Duata Senkar. The giant king sat upon a throne of bones, his eyes bloodshot, and his teeth sharpened like those of a shark. You were bold to come here, little morsel, Duata Senkar roared, his voice shaking the very foundations of the palace. Do you wish to be roasted or boiled? Saka stood tall, his white turban gleaming in the dim light of the hall. I have one request before you consume me, O king. The giant laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Speak. A dying man's wish is my favorite dessert. I ask for a piece of land. Saka said calmly. A piece of land as wide as the turban I wear upon my head. Duata Senkar looked at the small piece of cloth wrapped around the prince's head and burst into a fit of mocking laughter. Is that all? You are even more foolish than you look. I shall grant you this tiny patch of dirt, and then I shall crack your bones. Saka took one end of his turban and asked the king to hold the other end as they measured. The land on the edge of a great sea cliff. As they began to unroll the cloth, something miraculous happened. The turban did not end. It stretched further and further, covering the palace grounds, then the forest, then the mountains, expanding with a life of its own. Duata Senkar, blinded by his greed and confusion, kept walking backward to hold the end of the cloth as it grew larger and heavier. The turban became a vast white sea of fabric, pushing the giant further toward the jagged rocks at the edge of the southern sea. Realizing too late that he had been ensnared by a spiritual power far greater than his own, the king tried to claw at the ground. But the fabric was as strong as iron and as slippery as silk. eventually sweeping the giant off the cliff and into the churning waves below. As he hit the water, the heavens thundered, and the body of Duata Senkar was transformed into a giant white crocodile, cursed to roam the depths forever. The people of Madang Kamalan, watching from the hills, let out a cheer that reached the very clouds as they realized the tyrant was gone. They fell to their knees before Saka, begging him to take the throne and lead them into a new age of peace. Saka accepted the crown, but his heart was not yet at rest. He remembered his loyal servant Sembada and the sacred crease. He turned to Dora and said, "Go now to the island where we left Sembada. Tell him the war is won, and bring him and the crease back to the palace." Dora set off immediately, eager to reunite with his companion and share the news of their master's glorious victory. When Dora arrived at the island, he found Sembada sitting exactly where they had left him, the golden crease resting across his knees. "Sembada, great news!" Dora shouted as he ran up the beach. "Our master is the king. He has sent me to fetch you and the blade." Sembada stood up, his eyes narrowing. "I am glad for our master's victory, Dora, but I cannot give you the crease." Dora stopped in his tracks, confused. "What do you mean?" "The king himself has commanded it." "The king told me directly," Sembada said firmly, "that I must not let this blade fall into any hands but his. He told me not to move until he comes to claim it." Dora grew frustrated. "I am his messenger. My word is his word. Do you think I am lying to you?" "I do not think you lie," Sembada replied calmly, "but my oath was to the prince himself, not to his messenger. I will not break my word." The argument grew heated as the sun began to set, casting long bloody shadows across the sand. For Dora, his loyalty meant following the latest command to bring the blade back to the new kingdom. For Sembada, his loyalty meant guarding the blade with the original unchanging oath he had sworn to his master. Neither man would yield, for both believed their path was the only true way to serve Saka. Eventually, the tension snapped, and the two friends, who had faced countless dangers together, drew their weapons against each other. It was a battle of equals, Dora's speed against Sembada's strength, a tragic dance of misunderstood devotion. They fought through the night, their blades clashing under the moonlight, until both men fell to the ground, mortally wounded by each other's hands. Back at the palace, Saka felt a sudden chill in his soul and realized the terrible mistake he had made. He had given two conflicting commands to two men of absolute loyalty, setting a trap for their very virtues. He rushed to the island, but he arrived only to find the cold bodies of his two greatest friends lying in the sand. Between them lay the golden crease, silent and shining, the cause of a tragedy that could have been avoided with a single word. Saka wept for his lost brothers, his tears falling onto the earth that had soaked up their blood. In his grief, he realized that their sacrifice must not be forgotten, and that their story should become the foundation of a new civilization. He sat upon the sand and began to trace symbols into the earth, creating a script that would tell the tale of the two messengers. He wrote the first line, "Ha, ka, ra, ka." There were two messengers. He wrote the second, "Da, ta, sa, wa." They had a dispute. He wrote the third, "Padayayayania." They were equally powerful. And he wrote the final line, "Maga both of them died." This was the birth of the Javanese alphabet, a gift of literacy born from the sorrow of a king and the loyalty of his servants. Saka returned to Madang Kamalan, not just as a conqueror, but as a teacher, bringing the light of knowledge to his people. He taught them that words have the power to build or to destroy, and that clarity is as important as courage. The kingdom transformed. Where there was once only the sound of chains, there was now the scratching of styluses on palm leaves. The people learned to record their history, their laws, and their dreams, ensuring that the dark ages of Duata Senkar would never return. Saka's reign became a legend across the continent, cited by sages and poets as the era when the mind defeated the monster. He was seen as a bridge between the old world of spirits and the new world of men, a figure who balanced magic with logic. Tricksters of the forest and spirits of the mountains respected him, for he knew their names and could write them in the dust. As the decades passed, the king never married, his only companions being the memories of Dora and Sembada. He would often look at the alphabet he created and see the faces of his friends in the curves of the letters. The script became more than just a tool for communication. It became a sacred vessel for the culture's soul, traveled across the islands, morphing and changing, but always carrying the echo of that original sacrifice. Saka taught his people that a true hero is not one who merely kills a giant, but one who builds a legacy of wisdom. He emphasized that the crease we all carry is our integrity, and it must be guarded even against those we love. Under his guidance, Madang Kamulan became a beacon of art and philosophy, attracting scholars from distant lands. They came to learn the secret of the magic cloth that defeated a giant, and the magic signs that captured the human voice. Saka eventually realized that his time on earth was coming to an end, for even the wisest kings must return to the source. He did not fear death, for he knew he would live on in every word his people wrote. In his final days, he climbed the highest peak of the island and dissolved into a cloud of golden light. Some say he returned to the heavens to rejoin his servants, finally explaining the riddle that had cost them their lives. Others say he still wanders the hidden paths of Java, checking if the people are still keeping their oaths. The alphabet remains today, a complex and beautiful script that is a testament to the depth of Southeast Asian tradition. It reminds us that every letter we read was paid for by the history of those who came before us. The story of Saka is the story of how a civilization finds its voice through the pain of its growth. It stands as a pillar among the myths of the continent, alongside the tricksters, the deities, and the spirits. It is a story of transition from the primitive to the profound, from the oral to the written. As long as the letters Ha, Na, Ka are spoken, the names of Dora and Simbada will never truly die. And the wisdom of the alphabet's first king will continue to guide those who seek the light of knowledge. So may we all be as loyal as the servants and as wise as the king in our own journeys. Thank you for traveling through this ancient legend with us today. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of myth, please comment, like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio for more legendary tales.